Hello everyone, I'm K-Swope. After one failed anthology, a reboot, a requel, and 6 sequels, Halloween is back with its second requel, which also has the same name as the original movie, Halloween. Quite confusing. This sequel ignores everything from all the other Halloween movies except the original, so in a sense it's a new Halloween 2, which is quite confusing, right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, fear not. Because I, K-Swope, have created this graph for you. Go ahead and take a gander at that. This is a timeline graph for all of the Halloween franchise. So hopefully that makes sense to you as to how all of these films work together. The reason I bring this graph up is because this Halloween time, this October of 2024, what I plan on doing is covering one of these timelines, and I'm probably going to make this tradition. I want to eventually review all of the Halloween movies. I'm going to start out this fall with the latest Halloween timeline, which will follow Halloween, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and of course Halloween Ends. So 4 films. I just did my review for Halloween last week at the time of this video, so make sure you guys go check that out. I don't talk about what I'm doing there in that one because that is the start to, as you can see, like 3 of the timelines. So that's going to be great. It's going to stand on its own. If I review a movie, I'm not going to review it again. Therefore, Halloween 2, that also branches off with 2 timelines. I'm only going to review the movie once. So I'm not going to be doing it twice because it's part of 2 timelines. Hopefully that makes sense. Now that we got the timeline understood and out of the way, we need to ask a few questions. Those questions being, is this sequel a good sequel to the original movie? And is this sequel also good enough to warrant 2 sequels after this one? Because as we know, we got Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends after this. So, answering those questions in this review. We will have them answered, I think, quite definitely by the end, so stick around and stay tuned for that. But here's how this video is going to look. With all my reviews, I talk about the good things about the movie, and then the bad things about the movie, and then at the end, I will give it a number rating on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being the dog poop you just stepped in on the sidewalk because your neighbors won't clean up. 10 being the greatest thing you've ever seen. We're going into Halloween 2018. Now, before we do, a few things to mention. First of all, spoilers ahead. This movie's about 6 years old now at this point, so keep that in mind going into things. But like I said, spoilers ahead. So the first thing I'm going to talk about in this movie are the opening credits. The opening credits are really cool because it is, of course, a callback to the original Halloween, but I really like the effect of they have the reverse aging pumpkin. It's all rotted up, and then it's slowly becoming big again. And that plus, it's a little more modernized, a little more touched up, but still very classic and iconic Halloween theme that's playing during that. I think it really sets the tone really well for what we're in for in this movie, where we're basically picking things up 40 years after the first movie, acting like nothing really happened. And now we're basically just going to go back through that again, which is going to be interesting. And there's going to be a lot of themes here. There's a lot of themes in this movie of trauma and generational trauma and things like that, which I have some thoughts on. We'll get into those a little later on. But either way, I think this is a great opening credit sequence to kind of set the tone for what you're in for with this movie. Speaking of generational trauma, we see Laurie Strode in this movie, and Laurie Strode at this point is basically almost like a doomsday prepper. She thinks, I guess, the world's out to get her, and she's still terrified of Michael Myers because of what happened 40 years ago. Which, as I was rewatching this movie, I thought to myself, this is kind of ridiculous that she's still thinking this. But then again, everyone else agrees that it's ridiculous that she's still freaking out about this whole Michael Myers thing like 40 years ago because it defined her so much. So the fact that it's there is not necessarily a good thing, but the fact that everyone calls it out, I think, is a good thing because it is kind of ridiculous. Now, as we're going to see in the movie, it does kind of pay off, but in a real world, I really don't see a real person unless they've got some type of major other mental problems that are prohibiting them from moving on. I don't see a normal, healthy person who has a healthy upbringing outside of the one traumatic event being stuck in that same mindset that Laurie Strode is, and I think it's good that they call that out because that is something that's definitely worth calling out. Now, one thing I got to mention too that I really like, and this is a really, really small detail in the movie, but there is a sequence where there are these reporters. They're like podcasters. They do some type of a news talk show, whatever, something like that. These podcasters, they are at this gas station. They're filling up. And the gas station also has like a little like auto body shop next to it, which is where Michael ends up going. And he steals the jumpsuit off the guy who's working there in, iconic Michael Myers fashion, so we can finish the fit, if you will. Something I noticed that if you go back and rewatch this movie, I've seen this movie like 3 or 4 times now. You notice in one scene you can hear a crowbar drop, just kind of like in the background, which if you think about things and how everything's playing out in this scene, because we find out that he killed 2 people. One of the guy in the shop who he stole the jumpsuit from, and then like the shopkeeper, he kills both of them. And if you do the timeline from when they find out, it kind of makes sense that that crowbar drop sound was a result of Michael attacking him, which is actually really unique. So if you go back and listen to that scene, you might pick up on it, and I think that's very, very nice and very good attention to detail. Building right off of that scene, though, we get into what I think is the first, like, really good scene in this movie, in my opinion, that is, and that is the bathroom scene. So just for context, what happens is, basically, the male reporter, he is out finding these 2 bodies that Michael left them pretty bad shape. And the female reporter goes to the restroom. And Michael walks into the restroom, kind of all creepy like, and doesn't have his mask yet. And he's like knocking on the stall, and she's like, it's occupied or being used or whatever. And then he just kind of stands there. And then he sticks his hand over top the stall and starts dropping teeth, bloody teeth. And I remember seeing that in the trailer. This movie first came out. There were a few shots in the trailer I remember seeing. I was a lot younger when this trailer came out. I wasn't as quite exposed to horror movies as I am now, so I'm a little desensitized to it. But watching the trailer for this movie, there was that scene and another scene we're going to talk about shortly. But this is one of the scenes that I saw it and I was like, this is really unsettling, and I really like that. And then that turns into a whole like bathroom brawl fight scene. And I think that scene is choreographed really well. It shows Michael's brutality really, really well. And that's something we're going to see a lot in this timeline. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But in this timeline, we get to see Michael in a far more aggressive state than we've seen him in the first Halloween movie, which can be good or bad. Kind of depends on a matter of opinion. Personally, I like it. I won't talk about it too much now because when Halloween Kills comes out, I'll have a lot more to say about it then. Because that movie, out of these 3, demonstrates Michael's brutality the most. Another thing great about this movie is there is another really long... I don't think it's a one-shot scene. I think it's kind of just 2 really long takes kind of put together because there is a cut in there. It's not hidden, though, like the cut in the first Halloween movie. But, yeah, it's one scene that's really good. It's Michael basically... He kind of goes on a mini rampage where... It's Halloween time, it's trick-or-treat. The kids are all out in costumes. He's wandering the streets. He has his mask now at this point. He's in the full Michael Myers getup. He walks into a shed that's open at one of just the houses in the neighborhood, picks up a hammer, walks into this kitchen, basically beats an old lady in the head with it, and then takes her knife she was using to, like, cook or whatever. And then he basically goes just to the neighbor's house and just out of nowhere walks into their house, stabs a lady in the throat, leaves her for dead. It's pretty crazy, but it's shot very beautifully, and it is quite intimidating, which is really, really good. And again, kind of building on what I said if you watched my original Halloween review, which you should watch if you have not yet, it really builds intimidation, and it gives us reasons to fear Michael, especially because this movie was set up as a new jumping on point for the franchise, and so if you have those reasons to fear Michael, that's really good because not everyone's going to have seen the original Halloween movie, especially since this one has the same title of Halloween, so that's going to throw some people off. The other thing in the movie, too, I forget the character's name, but the little kid that the one blonde girl is babysitting, he is hilarious. Just the way he talks, the way he does things. I don't even know if most kids that age act and talk like that, but either way, it's funny. I enjoy seeing him on screen. The way he reacts to stuff is very funny, so I got to give a little shout out to him, fun character. But the other scene I want to tell you about, I mentioned earlier in the trailer, there were 2 scenes that I saw when this movie was first coming out that really kind of put me on edge and thought, okay, this is kind of scary. The second one being the closet door scene. So in case you don't know what happens, here's what happens. That little kid I was telling you about and his babysitter, he says he saw the boogeyman or whatever, and so she tucks him back in, being like, oh, it's fine, there's nothing to worry about, blah, 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 this and that. And before she leaves, he asks, can you shut the closet door, okay? She walks up to the closet door, tries to close it, but it won't shut. So she tries it again, and she opens it up. And as soon as she opens it up, Michael's there and just stab. And it's so intimidating because, we kind of see it coming. We know he's going to be there. Seeing just that isolated in the trailer, I thought was very unsettling, put me on edge. So I think that's a really great scene specifically. Then he goes on, he kills some people because, he's Michael Myers, so what do you expect? But that setup, and that's the thing too, it's the setup to the scare that really gets people on edge. And that's what made the first Halloween movie work so good. It's because it had really good setups. The whole thing really was just one kind of really long setup to this really big finale at the end. So, again, got to give credit where credit is due. I have two characters also that I want to shout out that I like specifically in this movie. One is Oscar. He is kind of the, for lack of a better term, more of like a buffoon friend guy. He's really chatty. He talks a lot. He's kind of annoying, but we love him for it. He's really funny, so I enjoy seeing him on screen. He doesn't really do a whole lot in the movie. He gets killed, unfortunately. But basically, it was fun seeing him while we had him, so I'm not complaining about that. I think that is a fun character, so I like seeing characters like Oscar. Another character I like seeing is Hawkins, and I really like Officer Hawkins, or is it, I don't know, Sheriff Hawkins? I don't know. Hawkins guy, you know who I'm talking about. I like Hawkins because from this movie we can see that he was around during the whole original Halloween ordeal 40 years ago. And so he knows to take it seriously. So the way I see it is he's sort of like, in the first Halloween movie, Loomis is trying to get people to take the whole Michael Myers thing seriously. So he's spreading a lot of fear, saying how terrible he is, how he's the embodiment of death and all this stuff. Hawkins is almost like a character who knows that and understands it. So he might not be, Loomis telling everybody, hey, do this and that. He's like, this is a problem. This is a threat. I am going to put an end to this threat if it's the last thing I do. And I really like that because he takes it seriously, but he's also level-headed. And unlike Laurie, he's not kind of caught up in all this trauma from 40 years ago. So seeing Hawkins, I appreciate seeing him quite a bit. I really like how his character is done. Another great scene I got to give a shout out to is the scene where Allison is in the police SUV and she's stuck in the back there with Michael because Dr. Sartain basically dragged him in there and he's unconscious. That whole sequence is so tense because then he drives to Laurie Strode's house because he wants to get Michael and Laurie to face off again for some reason, I guess, because he's a psychopath for all I know. Anyways, that's a great scene. Then there's the scene where Michael wakes up and he basically ignores Allison to basically kick in the back wall of this SUV to smash Sartain because, Sartain, he's got a bone to pick with Sartain. Sartain took his mask, and he doesn't like that very much. I guess he's very fond of that mask, for all we know. I have more thoughts on that later, so keep that in mind. But after that, then, of course, we get into the final battle, which is pretty good. It's very entertaining. I'm not going to get super big into the themes and stuff of this movie, because YouTubers have talked about that a lot, because this is a very fun to talk about franchise on the internet, Halloween franchise. So there's plenty of videos you can find talking about the nitty-gritties of what this means and the symbolism and this and that. So I'm not going to get into that too much here. But the final battle shows a lot of how Laurie has prepared and become different. And they have this idea pitched earlier in the movie about being the hunter and the prey, if you will. And so basically, at this point, Michael's been the hunter, but now Laurie is trying to flip that. And it's really interesting, makes for an interesting dynamic, because a lot of the moves that Michael kind of pulls off, Laurie ends up doing. Like, for example, she gets thrown off her balcony because they're fighting in one of the upstairs rooms. She's thrown off the balcony. Michael then walks over to the ledge to find out she's not there. Guess who's done that before? Michael. So, that's fun. Something else I like, too. This is a really weird note, but there's a scene where Laurie's at the door. She's got it all locked up. She's got her shotgun there. Michael breaks through the glass windows and is trying to grab her and everything. And Michael is grabbing the shotgun in a very unfortunate place because she fires it and blows off these two fingers. And so he's like 8-fingered at that point, which is kind of crazy. And you're still going to see that, too, in the next two Halloween movies, which is really interesting because we've never seen, I don't think, Michael dismembered before. And the fact that we see that happen, it lets us know a thing or two about Michael's powers and abilities, if that makes sense. Because they've always been kind of vague. And so he's not stopped by it, but also, like, his fingers don't grow back or anything like that, which is really, really interesting. And we'll get more into that as we go down this timeline. But either way, I think that's a really small thing that I think goes a really long way, hopefully. So after all that happens in the end, something you notice, if you watch to the end of the credit, you hear that iconic Michael Myers breathing again, which is kind of implying that, we don't actually see Michael die at the end of this movie, so he might be back. And spoiler alert, he comes back. The other thing I got to mention, too, that I noticed after watching this movie is that it's paced pretty good. I think it's probably paced a little better than the original Halloween movie, because my problem with that one was they did an amazing job with the setup in the whole Act 1. But after Act 1, it really slowed down to do a slow burn and build to the big third act. In this movie, we have it a little different, where it kind of starts out a little slower, but is building some smaller, intense moments, adding enough to make you more intrigued about what's going to happen next, and next, and next, and next, and next. And it is building then, and the momentum never stops, which is really good, because once you lose your momentum, that's when you lose a lot of people. So, again, the first Halloween, my only issue with that, really, was people were making some dumb decisions, and the pacing was not preferable, if that makes sense. This one, I think, is much better as far as pacing goes. So that's all the good things I have to say about this movie. I'm going to go and move into the bad things. Starting things off, let's go back the whole way to the beginning of the movie. The opening credits. I talked a lot about the opening credits in my original Halloween review. Again, if you haven't seen it yet, please go check that out. I put it in the card already, so there's no reason for you not to check it out when you're done watching this video. Or you can pause this video and then go check that one out. But the opening credits, I really, really liked in the original Halloween movie. They were really good at setting the tone. This one, again, it does that, but the build-up to it, I don't think works as well. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Because we have this scene where the journalists are visiting Michael, and they get the little mask, the Halloween mask, and it doesn't really work for me, I guess, because the mask really shouldn't be that important to Michael, and I have a whole other point on that later. But it goes that, and then for some reason everybody else in this insane asylum, hospital, whatever you want to call it, starts to kind of go nuts and, yell like madmen and dogs are barking and everything like that. When he's like, "Turn around, Michael, feel the mask is calling to you." Which, I think the whole thing, that whole idea, I don't know why he did that. The whole thing is so stupid. But then it kind of like hard cuts and the Halloween music plays and it starts with the opening credits. And I said the opening credits themselves are fine. But that scene I really just don't like. Not going to lie. But talking about the opening credits too, I talked about that a little bit and the score. I definitely think in the first movie, the score was really big and helped so much with making it scary. And so the score did a lot of heavy lifting, which I don't think is a bad thing in the first one, but it's something to note. This movie, the score doesn't do that, I don't think. It's kind of disappointing, mainly because the more I listen to the Halloween score and the more I go back and rewatch the movie after listening to it and seeing how all the music and everything works together with the scenes, the more I'm like, ooh, this is so good, this is so beautiful. And I feel like I can't do that with this movie because, honestly, the score is quite forgettable. Other than like the Halloween theme itself and the version of it from this movie, I listen to like film scores a little bit sometimes here and there. I get in the mood for certain things, especially around Halloween time. I want to listen to these film scores, and yeah, I really don't listen to anything on this except for the Halloween theme. So the score is kind of I don't say pointless, but just not really much. There isn't much to note. I'll put it like that. There isn't much to note about this score, which is quite unfortunate. Back in the opening scene, though. There's one line of dialogue that just gets me. I have so many questions about it. The reporter mentions when he has Michael's mask that the Attorney General gave it to him. And I'm like, hold on a second. Why would the Attorney General have a random mask used in a random crime that took place 40 years ago? Like, is that mask really that important? Do you think that evidence may be, like, discarded or something? Because they don't keep all the evidence from every crime scene ever. I'm sure when they close a case, they get rid of a lot of that stuff. I don't know. I'm not a cop. I don't know any of that. But, like, why would they be holding on to that mask for 40 years? Why would the Attorney General give it to these random podcast people no one ever heard of before? I just have so many questions about the line. It's such a stupid line. And I don't know why it was in there because it's dumb. And, again, that whole opening scene, I think, is just kind of dumb overall, not going to lie. I think the whole idea, I feel like this movie tries to put some kind of significance on Michael Myers' mask, and Michael really doesn't have much ties to it. Maybe he just likes it, because I know he does kind of go back for it, but, like, I don't know. I feel like people in this movie are kind of treating it like it's got some type of, like, supernatural powers or whatever. Like, you got Sartain puts it on then after Michael's knocked out by Hawkins when he hits him with his SUV. But, like, I mean, it's just a mask. It's not gonna affect much. It's cool. It looks cool. It makes the character iconic. But again, at the end of the day, it's just a mask. We've seen Michael in this franchise wear all kinds of masks. Some awesome and iconic. Some look terrible. Some you can see his eyes, and that's always a bad thing. So I don't know. It's dumb. I don't like how they put so much emphasis on that, especially in this opening scene. Something else about this movie that kind of bugs me is this is really with any requel, this is a problem, but just so many callbacks and callback after callback after callback. I'm like, I really don't care about all these callbacks. Like, a little bit's nice, but making a callback for the sake of making a callback is not always the best call. So if it has to do with the story, if you're making it part of the story, sure, go ahead. But like, just feel free to build on what you want to set up for this story. You know, don't feel like you're confined to stuff from the first movie and you just have to take every element and find a way to shove it in there somewhere. That's kind of annoying. I didn't dislike it upon my first couple of watch-throughs, but now I'm just kind of tired of it. Another point I want to circle back to that I mentioned in the good stuff, though, too, is Laurie being bent out of shape over one bad night 40 years ago is still just kind of crazy. Like, there are a lot of other people in real life who get over something worse in less time, so I think that's crazy. She's really overreacting to keep this going on. 40 years, one night, some random dude. Like, I don't know. That's like really obsessive behavior. And that actually makes Laurie look more mentally ill than Michael, not going to lie. The director of this movie is David Gordon Green. And I know he has a lot of experience in comedy. And that's not a bad thing, because I've heard from a lot of people, they say that horror and comedy are kind of like two sides of the same coin. And I kind of get that the more I think about it, because if you think of a joke versus a good scare, basically, what makes a good scare is a good setup and then a boom, right? Something that comes in, scares people. Whereas comedy, you know, you have a good setup and you have a punchline, right? And that's what makes people laugh. So you're kind of trying to do the same thing, just evoking a different emotion. And David Gordon Green, he does a great job. I think overall he does a good job with the three films that he does. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, though. Don't get me wrong. But because he has this background in comedy, there are a lot of comedic moments in this movie. And there were comedic moments in the first Halloween as well. And I appreciated those a lot. I don't appreciate them as much in this movie because, as I mentioned before, the comedic moments made for a good palate cleanser where it keeps you from being too desensitized from the scares and the gore and all that. This movie did not do that as well because the jokes were kind of too funny and there was too much and it was too often. It just felt really out of place a lot of the time. Like, there's the time when it was Karen, Laurie Strode's daughter, her husband, whose name escapes me, but he's not that important. He's setting mousetraps, and he's like, I got peanut butter on my penis. Which, don't get me wrong, I like a good joke like that anytime I can get one, but just, it's a little too much, if that makes sense. There's a difference between yelling at Lonnie from the bushes and Loomis just kind of being proud of himself and smiling. Like, that's funny. It's still funny, but it's like, it's over the top. It's not as subtle. It's not like a cutesy character moment that kind of just, tones things back just a tad before we get into the big final battle. It's just like, beginning of the movie, I got peanut butter on my balls. Which, yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right for a Halloween movie. Another thing I don't like, I talked in my last review, once again, about a really good jump scare that happens in the first Halloween movie, where the one kid from school, he's walking around the corner, and Michael's just there, and it's just the sound cue, and just scary. Again, it hits. It's really good. They basically do that same process and setup, except it does not land nearly as well in this movie. Something else that drove me nuts is I'm a big music fan as well, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out my Green Day video, go check that out in the card over there. Not over here, over there. Go check out that video. Great one as well. Big music fan, and there's a song that they play at the dance that Allison and her boyfriend Cameron go to that is so blatantly, clearly a knockoff of the song I Love It by Charlie XCX. I don't know if she perform it or is she just the feature. I don't know. But she's in the song. It's a clear knockoff. It's kind of painful to listen to, so I don't like that. That's more of a nitpick than anything. Another nitpick that I have, too, there's a line that Laurie says that I think is just so corny in the final battle, where she's like, Happy Halloween, Michael, and then just, like, I forget, that one-liner just doesn't land well for me. One of the things, this might be my biggest problem with this movie, generally speaking, though, is I absolutely loathe the name of this movie because there's this trend that must have started in the last 5-6 years. Heck, for all I know, Halloween may have started this trend, but just naming your sequel or your requel, if this is a few years later, or a legacy sequel, whatever the heck it is, naming it the same name as your original film. I get you don't want to scare off new people to the franchise. That's what people I heard do, because if you call it Halloween 7 or whatever, people are going to think, oh, I got to watch 6 movies before I go see this one. Then they don't want to see it in theaters. I get that, but Halloween, calling it Halloween again, I hate that so much.
It's just retarded.
Not to mention, too, we now have to preface the Halloween movies. And we're talking about the original Halloween. We have to call it Halloween 1978. And for this one, we have to call it Halloween 2018. And I hate doing that. I hate that so much because, like, just call one Halloween and call one Halloween something else. So, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. But we're going to wrap everything up. In the end, overall, Halloween is a good time and is a pretty well-paced movie. It's definitely not better than the first one, clearly, but it is still a quite enjoyable watch, and so I don't have very many complaints about it, of substance, really. Again, not a perfect movie, but it is still good time to be had with friends. And that being said, I give this movie a 7 out of 10 on my rating. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap things up for this review. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, I am K-Swope. If you like this video, hey, give it a like, hit that thumbs up button. Also, feel free to leave a comment if you have any thoughts about anything I said, anything that you agreed with or disagreed with. I'm open to hearing all of it. And hey, if you like this video, want to see more like it, or some of my more in-depth commentary videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that bell as well. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap things up for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.